Hey YouTube, in this video I'm talking about how to fix quad dominant sprinting. So as sprinters, there are two forms of ways you can actually sprint. This is for your quads, quad dominant, and for your hips, hip dominant. The reason why there's even a difference is because if you're quad dominant, it means that whilst you're doing most of the movements that you do throughout life, and if you go to the gym as well, this is quite easily attained through going to the gym, but usually this is like the basic setting that we all use our bodies for. Our quads are much easier to fire consistently than our glutes are, and our gluteal muscles. So what ends up happening is our quads just take on the majority of the strain whilst we're doing anything, whilst we're walking, running, doing gym work like squats or anything. And as this happens, our quads have gone stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where our hips and glutes have realized that they don't need to exactly be turned on. They don't need to actually function for life to continue on for yourself. So they get turned off and they just exist as muscles, but they're not actually used. The reason we want to fix this is because the way the quads function when we sprint isn't to produce force into the ground per se. It does do that, but that's not its main focus. Its main focus is to straighten out the leg. The problem with this, however, is since its main focus is to straighten out the leg, if you're a quad dominant sprinter, what's going to end up happening is as you're sprinting, you go through your cycle, then your foot's about to land on the floor. What's going to end up happening is your foot is going to straighten out in front of you, then you're going to land. Essentially, you're going to overstride, which is obviously very bad. Reason why hip dominant sprinting is much more better as a sprinter than quad dominant is because the hips, the gluteal muscles, but the front part of the hip, they're attached all the way down to your knee. So just like how your quads can lift your knee, your hips can also lift your knees. And when this happens, what's gonna end up happening is your foot is gonna make this Z. No, not your foot. Your entire leg is gonna make this Z shape. So from your knee downwards, so from your knee to your foot, your legs is gonna be pointed backwards. Like look at this finger, backwards like this. It's going this direction. And then all you need to do is squeeze your glutes, which will just force your leg to come down. And then you're going to land back on the floor in this position. It's not complete. Your leg isn't going to be completely straight. It's going to be slightly bent, which is what we want, so that your tendons can fire, which is another problem with quad dominant sprinting. It straightens out your leg completely. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to land on the floor, pull back here, bend your leg, and then fire, compared to using your hips where you lift up your knee, and then you're literally in this position, you squeeze your glutes, push down, land kind of like this, then you just fire off. Less time because you're not overstriding, less time because you have to reposition your body. As long as you're able to fix this from quad dominant to hips dominant sprinting, you're going to be able to go much faster, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to relax because you're literally just firing these two muscles and that's it, compared to just squeezing as hard as you could with your quads. Because if you use your quads, you essentially have to stay tense the entire time because you're lifting up your leg with your quads, and then you're landing on the floor again with your quads. Your quads are confused, and when you consider the fact that your quads aren't supposed to be firing up until you touch the floor, using your quads is actually hindering your sprint progress because it's being turned on when it's not supposed to be. Because you're supposed to have certain muscles be turned on and turned off, like yin and yang. Certain things need to be firing and certain things have to not be firing. And then when these things are firing, they eventually rotate, and you just keep going whilst you sprint. They just continue rotating again and again and again and again, which is why we want to be focused on using our hips or more our gluteal muscles instead of our quads, because when you use your gluteal muscles, you're actually able to turn on and turn off. Well, you need to feel them turning on and off and make sure you're actually turning them on and off. The main two muscles we actually want to use is the hips to lift up the knee and the glutes to push you back under, because it will make sure your foot lands under your center of mass, which makes sure that you're not overstriding. To turn these back on is relatively simple to do. All you need to do is completely isolate the hips. If you completely isolate the hips, you can turn your hips back on. And then to turn your glutes back on, all you really need to do is just squeeze them. Squeeze them whilst you move and try and adapt to how they function. The way I turned my glutes on was whilst I'm walking, right before I push off the floor, I'd squeeze my glute, and I'd actually feel myself move further and faster because I'm actually able to produce more power into the glute. Obviously, whilst you're walking, you have to remember that the glutes are firing in a slow twitch manner because you're walking extremely slow. But you want to be able to just turn them on for now. Just turn them on, and then once you get the sprint, once you get back to onto the track to actually sprint, practice turning them on quickly, just quickly when you need to. Just slightly squeeze and then relax, squeeze and then relax. What I tend to also do is when I'm actually on my way to training, I walk while squeezing my glutes slightly so I can just feel and ensure that they're actually turned on. So when I actually have to go and train, I don't have to worry about trying to turn them on or be scared I might be overstriding. I know my glutes are prepared and ready for me to work. Now, to turn on your hips, my favorite way to do it is to get down into a lunge, but put your back knee down on the floor. And once you've done that, try and lift up your front leg. The only way you can lift up your front leg is by squeezing your hips, by squeezing the muscles right here in this area. You won't be able to use your quads. It's impossible because the only muscle that's actually able to fire in that position is your hips and your glutes, which you can fire both, but for now just focus on trying to fire your hips. Once you're able to fire your hips and understand how that feels, then you can also try and incorporate glutes. If you're doing the movement right, there isn't actually a wrong way to do it, because if you try to do it wrong, your leg just isn't going to move. But if you're firing it right, what's going to end up happening is your front leg will just lift up, just like that. Just go up and down, go up and down. If you want to be able to get as high of a height as possible, now you also want to use your glutes. So you want to squeeze the opposite glute to the hip you're using. So the leg that has its knee on the floor, you want to squeeze that glute and then squeeze the hip, and you'll feel your legs just part even more. Now, another way to fix quad dominant sprinting, this isn't another way, it's a way you also want to do, is to strengthen the gluteal muscle. So this is your hips and your glutes, just around the hip area. You want to strengthen them all, your adductors, your abductors, and your glutes. Now that by this point, we'd hope this would be the last thing you do. Now by this point, you're actually able to you've turned on the muscles again. Now we want to make sure that when we're doing all of the movements we do in the gym, they're actually turned on. So if you're supposed to be lifting, like squats, for example, if you're supposed to be squatting with your glutes, you want to make sure you're squatting with your glutes. And for the squat, it's very important that we're not squeezing our glutes once we've already risen out of the squat. We want to make sure that we're squeezing our glutes as we're coming up. Obviously, the glutes will be stretched, so this will be a bit awkward to achieve. But as long as you've practiced, you've already turned on the glutes, you'll be able to feel how you're able to do this. And as long as you keep going, you're going to be able to strengthen the gluteal muscles. So that's just for squats, but make sure you strengthen the adductors and abductors with the hip machine where you open and close your legs. As long as you do those, you're going to be able to get good. And there's some other stuff like clamshells, for example. You can do as many of those with a band, without a band, doesn't really matter. Because in my opinion, it's not so much about strengthening these muscles, but ensuring that the minor parts of these muscles are turned on. Because as long as they're turned on, you're going to be able to move faster. Because whilst you've got your hips and your glutes turned on, you haven't got the entirety of your gluteal muscles activated. You need to activate everything so that it's actually able to function. But there is also a good chance that certain parts of your gluteal muscles are weak. Generally, it's your glute medius. As long as that's weak, you tend to have it's a bit weird, but what's going to end up happening is, let's use this but as an example. Say this is your leg. When you sprint, your leg's going to rotate inwards, or I don't remember, it's either inwards or outwards. This isn't when you're coming out of the blocks, because that just happens anyway, because you're trying to generate more torque. But this will be like whilst you're upright. And to fix that, you want to strengthen your gluteal muscles, because the reason why that twist is happening is because you're compensating with different muscles, so you're actually able to propel yourself forward. You don't want any compensations, especially once you're upright. In fact, even if you're not upright, you don't want any compensations. You want to be as perfect as possible, so you can run a race as perfect as possible. If I was to not do so well in a race, I'd want the reason to be purely because my mindset wasn't right and I wasn't prepared, or I messed up in the race, instead of I neglected things that I could have easily fixed, like strengthening my gluteal muscles, instead of instead of that. I'd much rather it just be something that I just messed up, like I tripped on my foot because I was zoned out, for example. I'd much rather that be a reason why I'm not happy with my race instead of it being a lack of strength, which is why you should be strengthening your gluteal muscles. As long as you can fix quad dominance in sprinting, if you have it, which there's a good chance you do, overstriding will just fade away. What you're gonna notice first is once you fixed it, you're usually gonna be able to fix it quite easily with upright sprinting. When you're in a dry phase and you're coming out the blocks, that's gonna be a slightly different game to fix, though it is quite easy to fix that too. Once you fix that, you're going to realize that you're faster, obviously, but you're not going to be producing as much power. That's because your body's trying to get used to this new position it's in, firing from the right muscles and using the tendons the way it's supposed to be in this new fashion that you've given it. Once it's adapted to this, your body will be able to move faster, and you'll very, very quickly see the times go down. If you like my video, like the video, let me know in the comments section below. Check the description, because anything I forget to say in the video, I always put in the description. And if you like my content, subscribe. Helps the channel out a lot. I post every 2 days at 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. If you don't know when that is, just hit the bell and then you'll be notified instantly.